I didn't cry when I saw the footage. I didn't even breathe. I just watched, frame by frame, as the colony burned. The news feed kept looping it. Grainy sensor footage from one of the last drones over New Carthage. First, the orbital platforms exploding like sparks from a welding torch. Then the alien ships blotting out the sky. And finally, the ground assault. Men cut down in the streets, women dragged away, children crushed under collapsing towers. It wasn't war, it was a purge. The casualty counter ticked up until it passed 1 million, then just froze. The system didn't have enough digits for what happened next. New Carthage wasn't just another colony, it was home, my home. I was born there, married there, raised 2 sons under its twin suns. Now it was dust. When the broadcast ended, there was silence across the fleet command chamber. Then Admiral Thorne's voice cut through, hard and cold. "Order the transit, all of them." No hesitation, no committees, no debate. 700,000 warships, every destroyer, every battleship, every carrier group humanity owned, were given their vectors. We weren't moving a fleet. We were moving an entire civilization's worth of hate. I stood at my station, hands locked on the console, feeling the deck hum as power surged into the jump drives. Around me, men who had lost families stared at the displays like they were looking at ghosts. There was no chatter, no bravado, just the quiet knowledge that we were about to erase something from the galaxy. They called themselves the Drek. 20 years ago, they signed a peace accord with Earth. Now they'd torn it up in fire and blood. I didn't know why they attacked New Carthage. And I didn't care. Reasons don't matter when you're shoveling corpses into mass graves. Somewhere out there, past 6 jumps, were the bastards who murdered my sons. And in 2 standard weeks, I would see them through the sights of the largest railgun ever mounted on a ship. I wasn't going for justice, I was going for extermination. They say the first jump is always the loudest. That's a lie. It isn't loud at all. It's silent. So silent you can hear your own pulse pounding in your ears. But it's not quiet in your head. The pressure of 100 billion tons of metal tearing through folded space feels like something's trying to pull your skull inside out. The Resolute, my ship, was one of the older battleships. 30 years of service, 2 major refits, a hull still scarred from the Sarkhan skirmishes. She was built in a time when war with the Drek was considered unthinkable. Now her gun batteries were hot, her missile racks loaded, and her jump drives redlined for maximum transit speed. Our orders were simple. Hit them so hard they never stand up again. The fleet's formation stretched farther than my tactical display could render. Carrier groups were running in the outer rings, their fighter wings docked and ready. Heavy battleships like mine took the inner core, guarding the carrier's flanks. Destroyers and frigates moved like shoals of fish around us, restless and twitchy, waiting for something to kill. Admiral Thorne's voice came over fleet comms again, calm and flat, like a man reading a grocery list. Jump 1 complete. Prepare for synchronized re-entry. All crews remain on war alert until final contact. War alert. No one took off their armor, not even to sleep. No one sat without their weapon close enough to grab. And every man aboard was thinking the same thing. What did they do to deserve what's coming? I thought about my sons again. Aaron was 17, training to join planetary defense. Samuel was only 12, still chasing his dog through the hydroponic fields. Both of them dead before I could even say goodbye. My wife's body hadn't been identified. Her name was on the missing list, which might as well have been a grave marker. The first week of jumps blurred into one long, sleepless cycle. Eat, check systems, run drills, jump again. Space doesn't care if you're exhausted. Neither does revenge. The Resolute wasn't built for comfort, but in war mode, She was stripped down to the bones. Half the crew quarters were converted into ammo storage. The mess hall served meals standing room only. The corridors stank of sweat, lubricant, and burnt ozone. The men didn't complain. Complaining was for peacetime. This was war, and war was a privilege, at least when it meant you got to take the fight back to the bastards who'd earned it. By Jump 4, we started getting intercepted transmissions. They were Drek signals, short, clipped bursts in their guttural language. Our translators picked up fragments, words like mobilization, containment, and retaliation. They knew we were coming. Good. Our intelligence teams fed the fleet constant updates. The Drek home sectors were on high alert. Their fleets were moving in-system. Their orbital defense grids were going live. We weren't worried. We weren't here to match them ship for ship. We were here to crush them before they could even draw a breath. On the 8th day, during transit prep, Thorne held a briefing for all commanding officers. It was the first time I'd seen the man's face since New Carthage. The holo display lit him in harsh blue, the lines on his face like carved stone. His eyes didn't blink once while he spoke. "We're not taking prisoners. No broadcasts, no demands. We make entry, burn their fleets, and keep burning until there's nothing left but slag and memories. This is not about territory. It's about sending a message." A message. That was one way to put it. Another way was genocide. But none of us flinched. They'd chosen this war when they butchered civilians. They'd made the rules. He paused, scanning the faces in the hologrid, making sure every man understood. "We do this clean. No glory hunting. No breaking formation. If a ship gets cut off, we don't go back for it. This is about victory, not heroics. Clear?" We all answered as one. Clear. The next jump cycle was the worst. The closer you get to enemy space, the more unstable the folds become. The drive core screamed like an animal in pain. Heat warnings lit every panel on my deck, and the air was so hot I could feel sweat dripping into my eyes inside my helmet. By the time we dropped back into normal space, we were inside the Drek's forward defense perimeter. The first real test. A squadron of Drek interceptors, sleek, angular craft bristling with plasma cannons, was waiting for us. They opened fire the moment our ships stabilized from the jump. We didn't even break formation. My gunnery officer, Lieutenant Hargreaves, locked all 6 of our forward rail batteries on the lead ship. The slugs tore through it like it was paper. 1 shot. 1 kill. The rest followed. The Drek pilots fought like they thought they could win. Brave, maybe. Stupid. Definitely. In 3 minutes, they were nothing but wreckage. We didn't lose a single ship. The wrecks drifted past our hull as we prepped for the next jump. One of them was still venting atmosphere, a Drek body frozen mid-reach toward a broken console. I stared at it through the viewport for a long time. Not because I pitied it, but because I wanted to remember what the enemy looked like when they realized it was over. By the 12th day, the strain was visible in the men's faces. Eyes bloodshot, jaws clenched so hard you could hear teeth grinding in the quiet. The medics started handing out stim patches just to keep everyone functional. Every ship in the fleet was riding on the same current of rage. It was the only fuel that mattered, and it burned hotter than plasma. Then came the final jump. Drek Prime. Homeworld. The approach was silent. No comm chatter, no music in the mess, nothing but the sound of the engines winding up for one last fold. My hands shook as I keyed in the final sequence, not from fear. Fear had burned out of me days ago, but from the knowledge that when we came out the other side, there'd be no turning back. The deck rumbled under my boots. The lights flickered. Space twisted itself into knots around us, and then we were there. Drek Prime filled the view screen. A dark green marble wrapped in clouds, its surface studded with the glitter of cities. Their orbital fleet was already deployed, a massive wall of ships bristling with weapons. Admiral Thorne's voice came over the fleet-wide channel one last time. "Targets confirmed. Weapons free." I don't remember the first shot we fired. I remember the recoil slamming through the Resolute like a thunderclap. I remember the Drek fleet lighting up with return fire, streaks of plasma lancing through the black. I remember the first enemy ship exploding, a silent blossom of fire in the void. And I remember thinking, this is for Aaron, this is for Samuel, this is for every man, woman, and child they thought no one would avenge. We didn't stop firing. The void was on fire. Rail slugs streaked across the darkness like meteors, tearing through Drek hulls. Plasma blooms erupted where our missile salvos punched into their formations. Their fleet moved like a wall of metal and fury, but they weren't coordinated. We'd hit them too fast, too hard. The Resolute's forward shields flared as incoming plasma splashed against them. The ship shuddered from the impact, the hull groaning like it hated every second. Damage reports scrolled red across my console. Nothing vital yet. We kept firing. Targeting Drek heavy cruiser bearing 080, closing at 15 clicks. Hargreaves barked over the deck noise. "Feed it the good news," I said. All 6 forward rails fired in sequence, the recoil hitting like a physical punch. The slugs tore the cruiser's forward armor apart, venting atmosphere and chunks of Drek crew into space. It rolled sideways, crippled, and one of our destroyers finished it off with a missile spread that turned it into shrapnel. Fleet comms crackled with Thorne's voice, low and sharp. "Keep pushing. Break them and make orbit. Ground batteries are priority once we're in low atmosphere." The Drek had more ships. Thousands more. But we had something they didn't. We weren't here to survive. We were here to win, and every man in the fleet knew this was a one-way mission if that's what it took. My tactical display flashed yellow. Incoming swarm signatures. "Missile screen, port side!" yelled Ops. Dozens of Drek warheads streaked toward us, weaving through debris. Our point defense turrets spun up, spitting streams of tungsten at impossible speeds. Most of the missiles detonated mid-flight, but 3 got through. The Resolute rocked as explosions hammered our flank. The deck pitched hard enough to throw 2 crewmen into a bulkhead. One didn't get back up. "Hull breach on deck 7, compartment sealed," reported damage control. "Casualty confirmed." I didn't even ask for a name. There'd be too many before this was over. By the time we punched through their outer fleet, the debris field was so thick our nav AI was screaming collision warnings. Hulls drifted, some broken clean in half, some still venting fire and gas. Bodies floated in the dark, alien and human alike. And beyond them, Drek Prime. The planet was beautiful in the way an executioner's axe is beautiful. Perfect form, terrible purpose. The surface was dotted with cities that glittered under the clouds, their lights twinkling like they didn't know death was coming. Admiral Thorne's order came in cold and final. "Commence planetary suppression. Leave nothing standing that can shoot back." Carrier groups dropped out of orbit, launching wave after wave of atmospheric strike craft. Bombers screamed through the upper layers, leaving contrails of flame as they delivered payloads that would have made old Earth's generals weep. The Drek ground batteries opened up. Beams of coherent light lanced upward, trying to swat our fighters from the sky. Whole wings vanished in flashes of white, but the rest kept going. I watched the first city burn from orbit. High-yield kinetic penetrators fell like spears of God, slamming into military districts, shipyards, and anti-orbital cannons. Fire bloomed across the surface, and shockwaves rippled through the cloud layers. It wasn't surgical. It wasn't clean. It was war. When our part of the orbital grid was cleared, the Resolute dropped into low orbit for direct bombardment. We targeted hardened command bunkers and planetary shield generators. Every shot we fired ripped another piece out of the Drek's ability to fight back. Still, they fought. Enemy interceptors swarmed up from hidden hangars, screaming through the atmosphere to engage us at close range. Their plasma cannons hammered our shields, each hit punching a little deeper into our defenses. We swatted them down, but they just kept coming. By the third hour of the engagement, half the fleet had already cycled back into high orbit to rearm. The rest of us stayed in the meat grinder. It was then that Fleet Command transmitted the next phase: ground assault authorization. Boarding actions. We weren't just going to glass the planet. We were going to land troops, take strategic control of their military infrastructure, and gut them from the inside. Every man knew what that meant. Close quarters fighting with an enemy that fought like cornered animals. "Landing zones marked," said Ops. "Transports ready for drop." I switched the main display to show our assault group. Dozens of drop ships, each crammed with Marines in full combat armor, hung in the Resolute's launch bay. The Marines weren't like the bridge crew. They didn't talk much. They just checked their rifles, checked them again, and waited for the green light. I made the call. "All dropships, this is the Resolute. Your go for launch. Bring them hell, boys." The bay doors opened, and the dropships shot into the void before angling down into the planet's atmosphere. I watched their heat signatures trail across my display until they vanished in the interference from the burning cities. 10 minutes later, the ground reports started coming in. Street-by-street fighting. Drek forces dug in behind barricades, firing from windows, rooftops, and sewer grates. The Marines advanced methodically, using grenades to clear choke points, flamers to purge strongholds. Civilians tried to flee, but the Drek had sealed off most of the exits, turning their own people into shields. We didn't play that game. The Marines pushed through regardless. From orbit, we could see entire districts flashing as firefights raged. Every time a Marine unit called for fire support, we delivered it, sometimes with pinpoint railgun strikes, sometimes with ship-to-surface missiles that erased entire blocks. By the 6th hour, the Drek's planetary defense network was in ruins. Command bunkers were gone. Their fleet was annihilated. Their army was scattered and broken. But Admiral Thorne wasn't done. His voice came over the comms one last time that day. "Begin civilian infrastructure strikes. This war ends today." I knew what that meant. We weren't leaving anything behind. Not factories, not power plants, not the means to rebuild. The Drek wouldn't just lose this war, they'd lose their future. So we fired. We targeted their hydro plants, their manufacturing hubs, their maglev transport lines. We turned the heart of their civilization into smoking rubble. Somewhere in all of it, I thought about New Carthage again. The screaming, the buildings falling, the people running with nowhere to go. And I realized we were giving them the exact same thing. It didn't stop me. It just made me fire faster. By the time we pulled back into high orbit to rearm and cycle the crew, Drek Prime was unrecognizable. Smoke blanketed half the planet. The glow from the fires was visible from space. We'd landed the first blow in humanity's revenge. But it wouldn't be the last. Because this wasn't just about Drek Prime. It was about every single world they'd ever touched. And we were going to visit every one of them. They called it the Purge Directive. It came in as a short, encrypted transmission from Fleet Command less than 12 hours after Drek Prime fell. One sentence, burned into every captain's orders. No Drek world will remain habitable. Not contested, not under human control. Habitable. That word told us everything. This wasn't conquest. It wasn't even war anymore. It was erasure. I didn't argue with it. None of us did. The Drek had made their choice at New Carthage. They'd written the rules in blood. Now we were just following them to the letter. Our first new target was a Drek industrial moon called Kelvus 3. Intelligence said it was a shipyard hub, half a dozen orbital rings, thousands of workers, 2 defense fleets stationed in-system. When we dropped out of fold space, they were already scrambling. Their fleets surged to meet us in a tight formation, keeping the shipyards behind them like a shield. We didn't give them time to breathe. Thorn split the fleet into 3 strike groups, 2 to engage the Drek fleets head-on, 1 to swing wide and hammer the orbital rings directly. The Resolute was in the main thrust. We pushed forward with the big guns blazing, cutting through their intercept screens like they were made of paper. One Drek battleship, bigger than anything we'd seen at Prime, took 3 direct rail slugs before it started to break apart. Even then, it kept firing, venting atmosphere and bodies into space until a missile volley from the Iron Spear cored it from bow to stern. By the time the fight was over, Kelvas 3's sky was a haze of wreckage. Then came the second part of the directive. The shipyards were still intact, their massive ring structures drifting above the moon's surface. They were works of engineering, hundreds of kilometers in circumference, bristling with construction bays and launch cradles. We could have taken them. We could have put our own flags on them and churned out warships by the dozen. Instead, Thorn ordered them destroyed. The first missile strike broke the spine of the nearest ring, sending shards of superstructure spinning into the void. One by one, the others followed, the explosions lighting up the moon's surface like a second sunrise. The Drek fleet was gone. Their industry was gone. And then we moved on. That became the rhythm of the purge. Jump in, smash their fleets, burn their worlds, leave nothing worth coming back for. Some worlds were fortified to the teeth. They fought hard, cost us ships, bled us with ambushes and minefields. Others barely resisted. Civilian colonies, outposts with token garrisons, those went even faster. We didn't make distinctions. The Marines called it Black Harvest. They'd land, sweep through whatever settlements were still standing, strip out anything useful, and level the rest. They worked with mechanical precision. No hesitation, no wasted motion. They didn't see people anymore, just targets. I told myself that was necessary. I told myself that the Drek would have done the same to us. Hell had done the same to us. But I knew part of it was something else. Part of it was that once you start burning worlds, it's easier to keep burning than it is to stop. The deeper we pushed into Drek space, the thinner their defenses got. Their fleets stopped coming to meet us head-on. They started scattering, hiding in asteroid belts, running for fringe systems. That's when Thorn changed tactics. Instead of chasing their ships, we went for the heart of their civilian population. Every major city on every major world became a target. Every agricultural hub, every water reclamation plant. We weren't just killing their soldiers. We were killing their ability to live. One mission stuck with me. A world called Horvek, a temperate paradise with wide oceans and green continents. It looked almost like Earth before the age of steel and concrete. Our scans showed no military presence beyond a handful of outdated orbital platforms. The population was almost entirely civilian. Drek, farmers, fishermen, workers. We dropped from orbit and started with the platforms. Then we hit their ports, their farms, their coastal towns. We turned their oceans into oil-slick graveyards and their fields into craters. From my station on the bridge, I could see the surface burning through the haze. Fires so big they changed the cloud patterns. One of my junior officers, a kid barely out of academy, hesitated at his console during the strike. His hands hovered over the fire controls. I didn't ask why. I just gave the order again, harder. He obeyed. An hour later, Horvek was silent. That night, the kid sat in the mess, staring at his tray without eating. I walked past without a word. There wasn't anything to say. We kept moving. Each jump deeper into Drek space brought us closer to the core worlds, the cradle of their empire. We were already seeing signs that they were fracturing. Muted transmissions of civil unrest, planetary governors declaring independence, local fleets refusing to answer central command. The purge was working, but it was also doing something to us. Men stopped laughing in the mess. They stopped telling stories. The banter that used to fill the bridge between jumps was gone. We'd turned into ghosts with uniforms, just bodies moving from one slaughter to the next, and I realized that was exactly what Thorn wanted. We weren't just killing the Drek. We were erasing the part of ourselves that would hesitate to finish the job. It came to a head at Vorin. Vorin was one of their religious worlds, a planet of temples and libraries, the kind of place you'd think might be spared even in war. Its defense fleet was small, but its planetary shields were strong, powered by massive generators built into their mountain ranges. We hit the fleet first, crushed it in under 2 hours. Then we focused everything on those shield generators. The Drek on the surface must have known what was coming. They sent a transmission. Not a surrender, not a threat. Just a request. A Drek elder, old and bent, speaking in our language. Leave our knowledge. If you destroy us, at least let the galaxy remember who we were. Thorn's reply was one word. No. We destroyed the generators. We burned the libraries. We leveled the temples. And when it was over, there wasn't a soul left alive on Vorin. That night, I dreamed of New Carthage. But it wasn't my sons I saw. It was Drek children, standing in the rubble, looking up at the sky like they couldn't understand why the stars had betrayed them. When I woke, I told myself it didn't matter, that they would have grown up to be soldiers, killers. But the dream stayed with me anyway. By the end of the second month, Drek space was a graveyard. Of the 48 worlds they'd held when the purge began, 20 were ash. 12 more were under siege. The rest were cut off, their supply lines severed, their fleets shattered. We'd become something worse than an army. We were a storm, and the Drek were running out of places to hide. We were 20 hours out from our next target when the message came in. It wasn't intercepted chatter or a propaganda broadcast. It was a direct transmission, encrypted, authenticated, and routed straight to Admiral Thorn's flagship. The Drek wanted to talk. Fleet rumor spread fast, faster than a plasma burst in vacuum. By the time the official relay came down to us, half the crew already knew. Some thought it was a trap. Others thought maybe the war was over. I didn't think either. I knew exactly what was happening. The Drek had run out of options. Their fleets were wrecks. Their supply lines were gone. Every jump we made was a knife in their gut, and we'd been stabbing for months without pause. They'd tried counterattacks, assassinations, even scorched earth retreats. None of it mattered. They were bleeding out. The official transmission was played for all senior officers during a fleet-wide secure link. The hologram flickered to life. An alien male, tall, gaunt, wearing ceremonial armor that looked like it had been worn for centuries. His voice was deep, guttural, but there was no mistaking the tone. This war has no future. You have destroyed more than we can rebuild. We propose a cessation of hostilities. We will withdraw from contested systems. We will pay reparations in resource shipments for the next century. We will recognize human territorial claims. There is no need for further bloodshed. No need for further bloodshed. I looked around the conference link. Not a single captain spoke. Not one of us had forgotten New Carthage. Not one of us had forgotten the millions dead, or the cities burned to the ground before we'd even fired our first retaliatory shot. The feed cut, and Thorn leaned forward into the hollow's blue light. His face was hard as stone, eyes cold enough to freeze a reactor core. Transmit my response. When he spoke again, his words were for the Drek. Your surrender is unacceptable. This is not a war for territory. This is not a war for reparations. You started this. We will finish it. There will be no truce, no peace, and no Drek left in the galaxy when we are done. End transmission. He cut the channel himself. No one questioned him. We made the next jump on schedule. Our target was a Drek stronghold called Telvos. It wasn't just another military base, it was a fortress world. Entire continents turned into defensive grids, orbital rings bristling with weapons, shield networks overlapping so heavily that they could absorb days of bombardment. If the Drek were going to make a last stand, this would be it. When we came out of fold space, the battle started instantly. Their fleet was waiting for us, drawn up in tight lines, moving with precision we hadn't seen from them in months. For the first hour, they fought like they believed they could win. They couldn't. Our fleet's sheer mass was too much. 700,000 warships, each one armed to the teeth, backed by carriers vomiting fighters into the fray by the thousands. Every time the Drek punched a hole in our lines, 3 more ships filled it. Every time they crippled a vessel, another one took its place. We broke them the same way you break a bone. Quick, hard, and final. The surviving Drek ships retreated into Telvos's orbital defense perimeter. That was when we saw just how far they were willing to go. They started firing on their own cities. It wasn't random destruction. They were targeting power grids, transport hubs, and civilian districts near our predicted landing zones. If we were going to take Telvos, we'd be taking a smoking ruin. Thorne's reaction was pure ice. They think we'll hesitate. We won't. Target their shield generators. Once they're down, level the surface. It took 18 hours to breach Telvos's planetary shields. The generators were buried deep, hidden under kilometers of reinforced rock. Our bombardment was relentless. Kinetic strikes, plasma salvos, and precision drops from specialized penetrator craft. When the shields finally flickered and died, the Marines went in. I'd seen plenty of planetary assaults by then, but Telvos was something else. The Drek fought with the desperation of a dying species. Every street was a kill zone. Every building was a bunker. They used tunnels, sewers, and collapsed structures to ambush our troops. The Marines moved slow, methodical, clearing 1 block at a time. They left nothing behind but wreckage. Hours into the ground fight, one of my comms officers flagged a transmission from Telvos Command. It was another Drek leader. This one a military commander, his armor cracked, his face bloodied. "Enough. You have destroyed our fleets. Our people starve. Take the planet. Spare the civilians. There is no honor in slaughtering the helpless." I could see the appeal in his eyes. He thought maybe we were still the kind of species that would accept mercy. Thorne's reply was the same as before, word for word. Unacceptable. The Marines received new orders. Civilian zones were no longer off limits. They burned everything. From orbit, I could see the smoke rising until it blurred the atmosphere. The oceans turned red along the coasts where the bodies piled up. Telvos was gone in 3 days. After Telvos, the Drek stopped talking. No more surrender offers. No more pleas. They fought, they ran, or they died where they stood. The purge picked up speed. Fleet Command didn't even bother issuing specific target lists anymore. We knew what to do. Every world we found, every outpost we stumbled across, got the same treatment. Some captains got creative. I heard about one who ordered the atmosphere burned off a Drek moon instead of glassing it, left the surface bare and airless, just so it could never be rebuilt. Another seeded an ocean world with engineered bioweapons that would wipe out every living cell over the next year. I didn't judge them. By then, the war had stripped us of the part that cared about the how. All that mattered was the end. It wasn't until the 3rd month that we heard the word extinction from Fleet Command. Not in a speech, not in a rallying cry, just a line in a strategic update. Projected timeline to total Drek extinction, 6 to 8 months. No one cheered. No one even spoke. We were too deep in it, too far gone. The strangest thing happened 2 jumps later. We came across a Drek colony that hadn't been warned. No defenses, no ships in orbit, just a quiet settlement on a green, peaceful world. They didn't fight. They didn't even hide. They just stood in the streets and stared up at our landing craft like they'd been expecting us all along. One of my junior lieutenants asked if we could take prisoners, just once, just for the record. Thorne's answer was short. No. And so the Marines went in. I didn't watch that one. Couldn't. But I read the after-action report. Population? 42,317. Survivors? 0. By the time we were ordered to prepare for the final push into the Drek home cluster, the last 6 inhabited worlds, they weren't even sending fleets to meet us. The system scans showed no large-scale mobilization, just isolated pockets of resistance, scattered like the last sparks from a dying fire. I stood at my console, staring at the tactical map. The red icons marking Drek space were disappearing one by one, replaced by the cold blue of human control. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like gravity, like something pulling us down so deep we'd never get out again. Because I realized then, when this was over, there'd be no going back to the man I'd been before New Carthage. The war wasn't just killing the Drek. It was killing us, too. We called it the End Sweep. 6 worlds. The last inhabited Drek systems, the core of what was left of their species. Every jump we made from here on out was a hammer strike meant to crush the final bones of their civilization. Fleet Command wanted it done in a single campaign. No pauses, no retreats. Hit all 6 worlds in sequence, burn them, move on to the next before their messages could even cross the void. The fleet briefing was short. Thorne stood at the head of the tactical hollow, eyes fixed on the red cluster of worlds like a predator staring at prey. This is the end. We take them all. We leave nothing behind. No survivors, no fleet assets, no infrastructure, no future. This is not a battle plan, it's an execution order. No one asked questions. No one had to. The first target, Vekaris, was a gas giant with 6 moons, 3 inhabited, each one covered in cities that clung to the rocky surface like barnacles. The Drek had ringed the moons with automated defenses, orbital cannons, missile platforms, interceptor drones. We didn't even slow down. The fleet split into 3 spearheads, each aimed at a different moon. Our warships cut through the drone swarms with wall-to-wall railgun fire, missiles painting the sky with brief, violent flowers of light. The cities went next. From orbit, you could see their grid layouts clearly, every street lined with glowing towers. We turned them into dust in minutes. The atmosphere caught fire. When the last moon burned, we regrouped and jumped to the next target without waiting for the debris to settle. World 2 Hravis was worse, a fortress planet. Entire continents had been carved into stepped citadels bristling with weaponry. Underground hangars launched wave after wave of fighters, like wasps boiling out of a nest. The airspace over Hravis was so thick with munitions that you could barely see the clouds beneath the crisscrossing lines of fire. It didn't matter. We had more ships, more guns, more fury. The Marines landed in the middle of live bombardments, their drop craft punching through anti-air screens by sheer mass and armor. Street fighting went on for 18 hours, but by the end, Hravis's citadels were rubble, its skies black with smoke. The population, military and civilian alike, was gone. The bodies lay where they fell, sprawled in the ruins. The third world, Sarek, barely fought at all. By the time we arrived, their defense fleet had already scattered, their planetary shields shut down. Our scans picked up scattered civilian convoys trying to leave the system, most of them on old, slow freighters. We cut them down anyway. The order was the same. No survivors. Marines hunted through the forests and cities, tracking Drek down in basements, tunnels, and caves. By the time we were done, Sarek was silent. I thought it would be easier without the fight. It wasn't. The quiet made it worse. By the time we reached the fourth world, Dravos, the Drek, knew what was coming. They didn't wait for us to land. They attacked the moment we dropped from fold space. It was chaos. Fleets clashing in close quarters, rail slugs ripping ships apart at knife-fight range. Drek boarding craft rammed into our destroyers, spilling warriors into the corridors. Some of our ships burned from the inside out. We still won. When the last Drek warship cracked apart under our fire, Thorn didn't hesitate. He ordered orbital strikes on Dravos's cities before the Marines even boarded. We hammered them from the sky until the ground was a smoking wasteland. World 5, Lacran, was the worst for me personally. Not because of the fighting, it barely had any. Lacran was a lush, green planet, more beautiful than any human colony I'd ever seen. Rolling plains, deep rivers, mountains like jagged knives. It looked alive in a way spacefaring worlds rarely do. We burned it anyway. The Marines swept through its villages and towns, leveling everything. The forests went up in flames so large you could see them from orbit. Wildlife fled in droves, only to die in the ash storms that followed. I knew then that we weren't just killing the Drek. We were killing anything that reminded us of them. That left the last world, Drenek, the heart, the capital of their ancient empire. Every story we'd heard from intelligence painted it as their crown jewel. Spires of black stone rising into the clouds, oceans so deep they had their own weather, a cultural center that had stood for tens of thousands of years. The Drek still had a fleet there, not a big one, but enough to make us work for it. They fought like they knew there was nowhere left to run. Every ship that went down took one of ours with it. By the time we broke their orbital defense line, the Resolute had lost half its crew to fires, decompression, and boarding actions. My bridge was running on backup systems. The smell of burnt metal and blood hung in the air. Thorn came over comms, voice steady despite the chaos. "This is the final strike. All ships, burn the surface." No pretense, no surgical precision, just destruction. From orbit, we unleashed everything. Missile storms, railgun barrages, plasma bombardments. Entire districts vanished in seconds. The oceans boiled where the strikes hit, sending clouds of superheated steam into the upper atmosphere. The Marines went in for the final sweep, not to take ground, but to kill anything still breathing. They moved from block to block like executioners, rifles spitting death into doorways and alleys. Drenek fell in less than a day. When the last transmission from the surface cut out, Thorn called for a fleet-wide channel. His face appeared on every bridge, every mess hall, every cabin. "The Drek are no more. Their fleets are gone. Their worlds are gone. This campaign is concluded. The war is over." No one cheered. No one said a word. We'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the end of something we couldn't name. I stood at my console, looking at the tactical display. The red icons that had marked Drek space were gone, replaced by empty black. Extinction. And in that moment, I realized the truth. We hadn't just wiped out the Drek, we'd taught ourselves how to do it again. The war was over, but the fleet didn't feel like it. We left Drek space behind in silence, running on half crews and damaged systems. The jump corridors felt longer, slower, as if the folds themselves knew we were dragging something heavy back with us. Every ship carried scars, scored hulls, patched plating, blackened gun ports. But the worst damage wasn't in the metal. It was in the men. You could see it in their eyes. That 1,000-yard stare people used to talk about wasn't a metaphor anymore. It was something alive, like a shadow that had moved in behind the pupils. The Resolute limped into the Sol system at a third of her original speed. When Earth came up on the main display, it didn't feel like coming home. It felt like arriving at a place that had gone on without us. Fleet Command staged the return like a victory parade. Every news network in human space had been primed to broadcast it. The orbital stations were lit up, banners streaming in the vacuum, tugs guiding our ships into position for the cameras. They wanted heroes. We gave them survivors. The docking clamps engaged with a dull metallic thunk, and the moment the airlock cycled open, the cheering started. Crowds packed the observation decks, waving flags, holding signs, crying and shouting our names. I stepped off the Resolute into a wall of sound, and I couldn't feel a damn thing. They pressed forward to shake our hands, to thank us. Mothers pulled their children forward to stand beside the men who'd saved them. Some people wept openly, clutching at my arm like I'd brought back a piece of their own dead. I smiled when I had to, said the words they expected. But all I could see in my mind was Drennock burning. The official reception was worse. We were brought to the Fleet Assembly Hall, a massive chamber lined with polished steel and glass. The Senate was there, the President, the brass from every branch of the service. Speeches rolled on for hours. Words like honor and glory and sacrifice bounced off the walls until they didn't mean anything. Admiral Thorne stood front and center, receiving medal after medal. They called him the Shield of Humanity. Nobody called him what he really was. When my turn came, I walked onto the stage, stood at attention, and accepted the ribbon they pinned to my chest. The President shook my hand, smiled for the cameras. Her grip was warm, too warm. "You've done humanity proud," she said. I nodded, but the words that came to my tongue were, "We've done something we can't take back." I didn't say them. They gave us leave. 3 months, full pay, no restrictions. Most of the crew scattered within days, vanishing into whatever lives they'd left behind before the war. I went back to my old apartment in New York. It hadn't changed. The furniture was the same. The smell of the place was the same. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. I walked through the rooms like a guest, touching the walls, trying to remember what it felt like to belong there. It didn't come. The neighbors were polite. Some were curious. Others kept their distance, like they could smell the war on me. I caught one couple looking at me the way you look at a dangerous animal behind glass. Fascinated, but afraid it might break through. I spent the first week walking the city. The noise, the crowds, the constant movement. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a thin layer of life, stretched over something fragile. Nobody here had any idea what it took to keep their lights on, their streets clean, their children safe. They knew the Drek were gone, but they didn't know how. And if they did, I wasn't sure they'd want to. On the second week, Fleet Command called. They wanted me to sit for an interview, part of a series on the voices of victory. I said no. The woman on the other end sounded surprised. "It's good for morale, Commander. People want to hear your story." I almost told her the truth, that my story wasn't fit for public broadcast, that the images in my head weren't the kind of thing you wrapped in uplifting music and aired between commercial breaks. Instead, I told her I had nothing to say. That was a lie. I had too much to say. One night, I dreamed of New Carthage again. Only this time, the faces I saw in the streets weren't human. They were Drek, running, burning, dying under skies lit with fire. And behind them, I could hear the sound of railguns, the roar of our engines. When I woke, the apartment felt too small, too quiet. I put on my jacket and walked until the sun came up. In the 3rd month of leave, I met with some of the crew from the Resolute. We sat in a small bar near the docks, the kind of place that smelled like old wood and spilled beer. They were different men now, harder, quieter. One of them, Hargreaves, the gunnery officer, spent the entire night staring into his drink. "You think they'll ever tell the whole story?" one of the others asked. Nobody answered. We all knew the answer. When leave ended, I got another call from Fleet Command. They wanted me to take a desk job, tactical advisor for planetary defense. It would mean staying on Earth, no more long deployments, no more war. I told them I'd think about it. But I already knew I couldn't take it. It wasn't about loyalty or pride. It was about the fact that the war had rewired me. I didn't fit here anymore. The streets, the people, the noise, they were all part of a world that had gone soft while we'd been out there breaking things. One evening I walked down to the waterfront. Cargo ships moved in and out of the harbor, their hull lights cutting pale lines in the dark water. I stood there for a long time, listening to the gulls and the slap of waves against the pier. A little boy stood nearby, pointing up at the sky where a warship was visible in low orbit. "Dad, is that one of the ones that fought the Drek?" His father glanced at me, then nodded. "Yeah, son. Those are the ships that kept us safe." I turned away before the kid could see my face. Because the truth was, we hadn't kept them safe. We just made sure the threat was gone, by killing it so completely it could never come back. And in doing it, we'd made something new. Something worse. United States. That night, I opened my comms and sent a single message to Fleet Command. "Reassign me to active deployment. Anywhere I didn't care where they sent me. I just knew I couldn't stay here, pretending to be part of a life I'd already burned out of myself." The war had ended. But I hadn't. The shuttle lifted from the docks before dawn. The city was still asleep. Windows dark. Streets empty except for the occasional cargo hauler rumbling along the waterfront. The skyline fell away beneath us, swallowed by cloud, and then Earth's curve filled the viewport. It looked the same as it had the day I first shipped out. Blue oceans, green continents, swirls of white cloud. Beautiful. Untouched. A world that had no idea how ugly we'd become to keep it safe. Fleet Command hadn't wasted time. The reassignment orders came through as soon as I sent my message. No ceremony, no speeches this time, just a line of text with a ship name, a departure time, and a destination. Outer Patrol, Sector 12. They didn't say what was out there. Didn't have to. The truth was, it didn't matter. It wasn't about fighting a specific enemy anymore. It was about staying in motion, keeping the war inside me from rotting in place. The shuttle docked with the Vanguard, a newer warship than the Resolute, sleeker and faster, her hull unscarred by combat. She smelled of fresh paint and clean metal. No ghosts here yet. The crew was young. Too young. I saw it in the way they carried themselves, alert but untested. They'd heard the stories, but they didn't wear them in their bones. Some of them looked at me like I was a relic, a piece of living history. I could feel their eyes on the medals pinned to my uniform, on the faded unit patch from the Resolute. They wanted to ask about the Drek War. None of them did. We left Earth orbit within the hour. The jump drives hummed beneath my feet, familiar and comforting in a way that nothing planetside ever would be again. The black swallowed us, stars stretching into lines as the fold engaged. The Vanguard slipped between layers of space, the transition so smooth it felt like falling asleep. I didn't sleep. Instead, I stood on the bridge, watching the nav display chart our course into the outer reaches. There were no red icons here, no targets, no active war zones, just empty systems, mining stations, and the occasional fringe colony. It was supposed to be quiet work. But deep down, I knew quiet never lasted. 3 weeks into the patrol, we picked up our first distress signal. A mining outpost on the edge of Sector 12, reporting unidentified ships in the area. Fast, armed, not broadcasting any known transponder codes. The crew tensed. They'd trained for this, but training was clean. Neat. Real contact was something else. I ordered us into a high-velocity approach, shields at full, weapons hot. The The younger officers hesitated a moment before executing the commands, just long enough to remind me they'd never done it for real. When we dropped out of fold space, the outpost was still there, and so were the ships, 3 of them, small but bristling with guns, skimming the asteroid belt like sharks. They didn't run when they saw us. That was their mistake. The fight lasted 6 minutes. The Vanguard's railguns tore through their hulls like foil, venting fire and atmosphere into the void. We didn't bother hailing them. We didn't need to know who they were. The outpost hailed us after the shooting stopped, voices spilling gratitude over the comms. I said the right things, told them they were safe now. But the truth was, it wasn't safety we'd given them. It was a warning. The way we'd moved, the way we'd hit those ships without a word. It was the Drek War all over again, just on a smaller scale. That night, in my quarters, I sat with a drink and stared at the ceiling. The Drek were gone. Entirely gone. But the part of us that killed them hadn't gone with them. It was still here, humming under the skin of every warship in the fleet. We'd learned something in that war, something dangerous. How easy it was to burn everything. How final it felt. The next months blurred together. Patrols, minor skirmishes, the occasional boarding action. The Vanguard grew harder, sharper. The crew lost their hesitation. They started to move like the men on the Resolute had, all clipped orders and steady hands. Some of them began to understand the quiet truth. Out here, the line between defense and destruction is thin, and once you cross it, you never go back. One evening, during a long drift between jump points, a young ensign asked me if I thought there would ever be another enemy like the Drek. I thought about it for a long time before answering. "No," I said finally. "There won't be another enemy like them. The next one will be worse." He didn't ask why. Maybe he already knew. 6 months into the patrol, we were rerouted. Fleet Command had picked up strange readings from beyond mapped space. Something big, something moving. The coordinates were well past the outermost colonies. No comm traffic, no beacon relays, just black. The Vanguard changed course. The crew whispered about what we might find. Pirates, rogue AI, maybe a remnant of some forgotten war. I didn't join in. I'd learned a long time ago that it didn't matter what waited for us. What mattered was what we'd do when we found it. We dropped out of fold space into a dead system. No planets, just a cold, dim star and a belt of shattered rock. The scanners swept wide, searching. That was when we saw it. A structure half buried in the largest asteroid, massive, angular, older than anything human. The hull plating was blackened with age, pitted from micrometeorite impacts. No power readings, no communications. It looked dead. But I'd seen dead things before. Sometimes they weren't. We closed in slowly, weapons primed. The bridge was silent except for the hum of the drives and the soft chirp of the scanners. As we drew near, the Vanguard's comms lit up with a faint signal, weak, distorted, in a language none of our systems could parse. The crew shifted in their seats, uneasy. I stared at the display, at the shape of the thing in the asteroid, and I felt it. The same cold certainty I'd felt the day New Carthage burned. This was going to end in fire. We backed off to a safe distance and sent a probe. It didn't make it to the structure. Something, some invisible defense system, tore it apart in a burst of light. The crew looked to me. I looked to the captain. The captain looked to Fleet Command as standing orders. Any unknown threat is to be neutralized before it can spread. And there it was again. The Purge Directive, dressed in new language. We opened fire. Rail slugs punched into the structure, breaking it apart in showers of debris. Missile salvos followed, cracking its spine. The asteroid belt lit with explosions, fragments spinning off into the dark. When it was over, there was nothing left but drifting wreckage. We didn't know what it had been. We didn't care. Afterward, the captain came to me in the wardroom. He didn't ask whether we'd done the right thing. He didn't ask what it had been. "You've done this before," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, I have." He waited for me to say more. I didn't. Because the truth was, it didn't matter what the enemy looked like, or where it came from. We'd become the kind of species that erased threats without hesitation. The Drek had been the first. They wouldn't be the last. That night, as the Vanguard turned toward the next patrol zone, I stood at the viewport and watched the wreckage of the asteroid fall behind us. Somewhere out there, past the black, something else was waiting. And when we found it, we'd do the same thing all over again. Not because we had to, but because we knew how. And because once you've learned how to burn a species out of existence, the galaxy never looks the same again. That's the thing about wars like the Drek campaign. People think they end. But they don't. They just wait for the next name to carve into the history books. And I knew, with the kind of certainty that keeps you awake at night, that when the next name came, humanity would be ready. Too ready.